Hi, this is Professor Ryan Evans, and we're going to be covering week 2 of Scotland Quest for Freedom, History 277. So this week, we're going to be covering William Wallace, and you should be reading the PDF of the William Wallace, The True Story of Braveheart, and you'll find that link on the website. So today we're going to cover the tyranny of King Edward I in England, William Wallace's early life, and then how he started the rebellion and led Scots, the Battle of Stirling Bridge, the Battle of Falkirk, and you should be reading the William Wallace book from page 43 to 185 this week. With that being said, we're going to start with William Wallace's humble beginnings. So his birth has been debated by historians, depending on when you want to feel of when he was born. It was debated between 1260 and 1278 AD after Christ. His parents' name was not definite due to lack of meticulous records of Scotland at the time. There's not a lot of areas where they kept written records. But his father was either Malcolm or Andrew Wallace, and his mother was either Jean, Joan, Margaret Crawford. So they do know that the family name of the mother was Crawford, but it could be up for grabs of what her first name was. The largest misconception was that he was born in Renfrewshire, Scotland, but this town even had plaques and touted the myth of this, but he was actually born in the district of Cale. So our best account of William Wallace, and you'll see a lot of quotes from Blind Harry, is Blind Harry. He was a most historical record of William Wallace, and he derived from the accounts of an epic poem comprised by Blind Harry in the 15th century, more than 100 years after the death of William Wallace in 1305. William Wallace was killed 1305. If you've seen the end of Braveheart, spoiler alert, he's killed in a very disastrous way. He was hung by the neck just before he would his neck would snap and he would die of that. They cut him loose, and then they cut open his stomach and removed his organs while he was watching, and then they beheaded him, and then they put his head on a pike on London Bridge on a stake, and then they cut up his body and spread it all over England. Very disastrous end. The poem deals with Wallace's early career and rise of fame, which has a lot of detail about his life and an insight. It also has confirmed shreds of documentary evidence, which it is based on. And those archaeological documentary evidence we can find throughout other texts that confirm Blind Harry's. So, Scotland's terms with England in 1174 was fairly dire. The Kingdom of Scotland in relation to the King of England was clarified in the Treaty of Falaise, which was in 1174. Scotland could retain a king, but it was more like a puppet king. They did whatever the English wanted, which was to raise taxes and to support the British Empire. After 15 years later, Richard the Lionheart canceled the treaty because he thought it was too lenient on the Scots. Richard the Lionheart saw Scotland as just a band of rebels, and that they were almost second-class citizens compared to him. England sold the rights that kept the peace of the borderlands between England and Scotland. To finance the campaign in the Holy Lands, since they were doing the Crusades at the time. So they spent a lot of money going into Jerusalem, but it was a religious facade. Facade was like it was kind of mistaken identity. That's a whole nother lecture, but the Crusades was almost an excuse to go loot the rich areas of Jerusalem for gold and wealth. And it was under the name of returning the Holy Lands to the crown and control of the good Christians from the Muslims. But it was really an excuse to go rooting, pillaging, and plundering the rich areas in the Middle East. So Scotland in 1280 was a very different, was comparatively wealthy. They had a really good agricultural base. They had a bunch of sheep that they had used for wool, and they had a bunch of trades with Norway and the Scandinavian countries, since they were so close to the borders of Scotland, and so they were doing quite well. Religious houses were built built grand churches that spilled out to create civic improvements. So whenever a church came up, then the city around it, the church poured money into it for welfare programs, and brought up and saw it as a mission to enlighten the inhabitants of the city. Great cathedrals in Glasgow, Dumrick, and in the north had great elaborate abbeys with very schooled monks that would copy Bibles and manuscripts and keep records. In Aberneth, Scone, and Dunfermline, and contain also monasteries for these monks. Secular development populated in Scottish countrysides, where there was outside of the reaches of the church, hundreds of castles and further fortified houses of the landed class. Now, the rising prosperity of bourgeoisie's class emerged as many Scots had stake in land titles, in agricultural businesses, in trade and mercantile businesses, and the wealth that they were willing to fight to protect from the English, because the English were trying to take taxes and even take those lands away from them and give it to their own nobles as promises for favor for the king. So Scotland was looking for someone to rally upon, and that man turned out to be William Wallace. He had strong ties to the land. He was very noble to his village and for his country. He felt that he felt depraved from the English and felt the unfair taxes, and then also the Edict of Prémuntre, where you saw in Braveheart, where they would try to breed them out. Edward the Longshanks passed legislation that on every marriage, the Englishmen will have carnal relations with and sleep with the bride before the husband can consummate the marriage. This would hopefully impregnate the woman with English blood to carry on the noble bloodline of England and kind of.
So this concludes part 1. Next part we'll put part 2, and I'll go into the battles of William Wallace.